Hello, everyone. It is the top of the hour. I want to begin by thanking everyone for joining us today to learn about the North Utica Agricultural Mitigation Bank. Without further ado, we'll jump right into it. The overview for today's presentation is a quick introduction and overview of the program by NRCS's own Rich Nelson. We will then dive into exactly who Westervelt Ecological Services is, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty project details. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand the reins to Rich Nelson, who will talk about the NRCS program.
Okay, thank you, Landrum. And the other thing I'm going to do that I didn't put in the agenda that I think is warranted is, Landrum, I believe there's 4 of you that have joined us from Westervelt.
Correct.
So we have Landrum Neer, Tyler Bell, and she's kind of the head of the office there in the Rocky Mountain region. We have Chloe Lewis, and we have Will Diggins. And so those are the staff that we are currently working with in this cooperative effort on this wetland mitigation bank. And it occurred to me today while I was eating lunch that some people might even be thinking, well, I don't know what a wetland mitigation bank is. And so in just a couple of sentences, a wetland mitigation bank is a site where a wetland is either created or restored. And then those acres, those what we often refer to as credits, are available for purchase by somebody who needs them to mitigate their impacts. And in our case, it's going to be to mitigate their impacts because they may have drained or want to drain a wetland on their property and still stay in compliance with Food Security Act. So this is an alternative to doing mitigation on their own land or trying to find some other means to offset their impacts. And essentially what has happened here, for those of you that have kept tabs of this, in the 2014 Farm Bill, amount of money was allocated specifically for NRCS to go out and seek partnerships with private industry or NGOs, just like we've done here, to go create wetland mitigation banks. There's a lot of wetland mitigation banks out there for Corps of Engineers purposes, but the same really was not true for NRCS and Farm Bill Food Security Act compliance purposes. And so this effort has been ongoing since Westervelt Ecological Services was awarded the grant several years ago. And their charge, using some funding from NRCS along with their own financial resources, is to go out and find a site, build a wetland mitigation bank, and make those credits available to agricultural producers. I'll just comment briefly on the project history. We've had a little bit of an arduous journey here because the original site that was put forth in their proposal did not come to fruition through some complications related to endangered species compliance, wetland permitting, and some of those factors. And so they've then selected a second site, which is what you're going to hear about today. And I think with that, I'll turn it back to you folks, Landrum at Westervelt, and let you proceed.
Thank you much, Rich, for that program overview. I think it's important that you understand exactly who Westervelt Ecological Services is. So a quick background. The Westervelt company is a family-owned lumber company dating back to 1884, which originally began as a paper company. Realizing the importance of nature as a major resource in the paper-making business, the Westervelt family instilled an appreciation for the environment and its conservation. This philosophy remains today and helped spark the creation of Westervelt Ecological Services in 2006. It was a very humble beginning for Westervelt Ecological Services. We started only with 3 employees, a single office with cardboard boxes as the desk. They later added a 4th employee who had to work out of his vehicle because they didn't have space. Now today we have offices in Colorado, California, Alabama, Florida, and Tennessee. Our connection with the Westervelt company and being privately owned and funded really allows us to implement some high quality and enduring projects that helps us stand out as an environmental restoration company. It's not about digging a hole and filling it with water. High quality restoration is our game, and it's difficult, but it's lasting. So some of our numbers to date, we have over 20 miles of stream that has been permanently protected, roughly 30 acres that we manage and protect, 8,900 acres that are managed through prescribed burning. We protected 47 species and have planted over 1 million trees. And this all stems back to the core of what the Westervelt company stands for. A family-owned company with deep roots in conservation and land stewardship. So what exactly is the North Utica Agricultural Mitigation Bank? It is a mitigation bank developed under the NRCS Wetland Mitigation Banking Program that allows agricultural producers to purchase banked wetland credits to offset their wetland impacts. And it also helps replace low-quality wetlands in agricultural areas with high-quality wetland complex that is much more beneficial to the region. All this was possible through an award or a grant awarded by the NRCS, as Rich had mentioned, to develop a bank in Nebraska to help conserve high priority habitat. There are, I believe, 9 other similar projects approved nationwide. However, we are the pilot program and the first in the state of Nebraska. But exactly why do agricultural producers need to mitigate in the first place? In 1985, wetland conservation compliance provisions were introduced to the Farm Bill. What this meant to producers is that these provisions could make farmers ineligible for certain USDA benefits such as CRP, EQIP, and even commodity price supports for crops if they grew those commodities on converted wetlands. Further, in 2014, the Farm Bill linked the wetland conservation compliance provisions to subsidies paid out by the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation under the crop insurance, the Federal Crop Program, excuse me. This can lock up large sums of money for producers until they have proven to mitigate. So the project goals, primary goal is to keep producers compliant with the 2014 Farm Bill by allowing them an efficient means and an alternative means to offset agricultural impacts to wetlands. We also want to restore wetlands in historically wetland dominant areas that have been diminished through anthropogenic activities like road development, ditch diversions that has disconnected the local hydrology from these playa basins. And finally, we want to protect the land with a permanent conservation easement and a non-wasting long-term endowment to provide funds that will help manage the site indefinitely. So kind of probably wondering exactly where we're located. We are very close to the York and Seward County border. The reason we selected this site is due to a number of reasons. One is the existing topography and historic wetland basin. We wanted to, obviously, it's much easier to restore wetlands where wetlands once were. There were also hydraulic soils present, those being Fillmore and Massey soils. And we also looked at crop stress during rainy months, which can be a great indicator of wetland potential. If corn is not growing well there, it's likely because it's too wet, and it'll make a great wetland. Another requirement on choosing the site was that it has to have been intensely cropped for multiple decades. Basically, the goal being that we want to get these converted wetlands back to their normal functioning. Another reason we chose the site is because of the conservation efforts of the region and the immediately adjacent properties. The purple site is the North Utica Agricultural Mitigation Bank, and the green sites are the conservation sites within the region. And as you can see, our site fits within the regional conservation landscape, which includes federal, state, and even privately owned CRP lands across the area. Also, the site sits within the critical habitat for whooping cranes. I'm sure you are all aware that this wetland site sits within the central flyway, which is critically important to millions of migratory waterfowl and shorebirds. These species rely on the wetlands for roosting, feeding, shelter during their spring and fall migrations. However, despite its importance, only 10 to 20% of the original 200,000 acres of the Rainwater Basin playa wetlands remain today, which makes this a very high priority conservation area. And as we continue to zoom in, you can now see the conceptual design of the wetland. The idea is to develop a total of 40 acres of restored playa wetlands. In the blue, you can see that there are existing wetlands on site. Though we will be seeding this with wetland veg, it will not be appropriate for credit sale because they have functioned as wetlands before restoration activities commenced. To restore the 40 acres, we will excavate historical wetlands to reconnect hydrology by removing sediment that has been built up within the wetland footprint. And essentially, we will reconnect the surface flows that enter the site. The goal being that these wetlands will function autonomously by accessing runoff, snowmelt, and direct precipitation. The result of our construction activities will be temporarily to seasonally flooded playa basin wetlands. These are typically inundated 4 to 6 weeks. That's usually between April 15th and June 1st. And it's very normal for these to dry out for the remainder of the year, except for large rain events. So not always a lot of water on these sites. The excavated material will be placed on the existing natural hill slope to the northwest and will be drill seeded with native seed type. The wetlands will also be seeded and planted with natives that are appropriate for the soil types that are present there, being Fillmore and Massey soils. In yellow, you can see that there is a 30 to 100 foot vegetative buffer around the wetland cells. And this is to prevent sediment deposition, primarily from that northwest hill slope, because it has a steep grade. We don't want that sediment becoming, or at least getting into the wetland basins at post-construction activities. In addition, this buffer will also create fantastic bird habitat in and around the cells. As you can see with the elevation model, our wetland restoration fits roughly within the lower topography of the site. Currently, the site is a farmed agricultural field, and the restoration activities that will commence towards the end of this year will turn this into a farmed agricultural field to a fully functioning playa wetland, which is pretty cool. But exactly how do we keep the site functioning as a wetland post-construction activities? In order to maintain as a wetland, we will implement the bullet points that are listed on this slide. The first being placing a conservation easement on the site. This is essentially the capstone in developing a mitigation bank to prevent any kind of future farming or even development of the site after it's become a mitigation bank. We will also implement interim and long-term management plans. The land management activities implemented will encourage the reestablishment of desired species for the sole effort of natural ecosystem restoration. And these land management activities include aerial herbicide application, burning, mowing, grazing, and even flooding to take care of these noxious weed species. A big one that we're going to have to take care of and fight being reed canary grass. To ensure the project goals and the management plans can be executed, something that we do with our mitigation banks is we apply a non-wasting endowment and financial assurances that will provide funds to implement the management techniques and ensure that the project is seen through completion. We will also have continuous monitoring to ensure that the site is durable, and we will report those results to the NRCS yearly. So in developing a mitigation bank, there are a lot of steps that are required, and they're kind of listed out in these bullet points. These bullet points represent the tasks needed to fully develop a mitigation bank. However, there are many subtasks also under these project phases that are not listed but are essential for project success. The big ones being securing the land, technical studies, which include hydrology, vegetation, soil, cultural, just to name a few. You have to put together your documents. You have to have a mitigation plan, a management plan. A lot of permits you have to go through, 404, stormwater, ESA, grading permits, and then also having to work with the county and the roads department. And also continuous ongoing monitoring to make sure the wetlands are successful and they remain successful. Land management and set aside funds to protect the wetlands. And finally, as a capstone, placing a permanent conservation easement over the site. And all of this is to say that these are the forces that drive not only credit pricing, but also the decision to purchase credits by agricultural producers. And all of this kind of brings us, apologies, all of this brings us back to project benefits. By purchasing a credit, it takes care of all the items on the previous slides. In turn, the agricultural producer is able to save time. The purchase of a credit takes a couple of weeks versus a year or more that it would take a producer to come up with a mitigation plan and implement that plan. This allows agriculture producer to remain eligible for funding much, much faster. It also saves money. Credit development is more expensive on a smaller scale, which can be the case if a farmer were to mitigate their own small impact on their own. Wetland restoration is constant and it's expensive, so it's nice to be able to walk away by simply signing a check. The biggest benefit, I believe, of the bank and program is the elimination of risk and liability. The bank sponsor is responsible for all risk associated with the bank sponsor being Westervelt Ecological Services. And this includes ensuring long-term success. The producer simply writes a check and is able to move on. Another enticing point for agricultural producers is that they do not have to place an easement over their property, which is required, but can also lock up their land potential. They can do what they want with the wetlands that they offset through credit purchase. It also saves money because we can continue to utilize this piece of their property that might have been used for wetland development without diminishing appraisal values. So you're probably wondering where we are able to help producers out. The star on this slide designates the location for the North Utica Agricultural Mitigation Bank. The bank's services the Rainwater Basin, Central Table Playas, and the Todd Valley Playas. It's important to note that this does not incorporate all of the playa wetlands in the region. There are plenty outside the designated service areas. However, impacts outside of but close to the service area are also eligible. Basically, we want to keep the wetland mitigation in kind, so playa wetlands mitigating playa wetlands, while also helping producers where we can. I'm now going to hand the reins on over to Will Diggins, who is going to go through the process of credit determination and sale.
Thanks, Landrum. As he said, I am Will Diggins. I am the new business development representative here at Westervelt Ecological Services in the Rocky Mountain region. And first off, I want to just say thank you to NRCS for attending this and allowing us to kind of walk through this program with you guys, and also to Landrum for a great presentation he's put together. I've actually only been at West now for a few days, so I have a bit of an outsider view on looking at this program in particular, and there's really a few things that stand out to me before I get into the nuts and bolts of this slide. But the first thing was that I had no idea that NRCS was pursuing mitigation banking prior to hearing about this. So I was really excited to see that, because it really is a great model to address wetland losses and negative environmental impacts, and really create uplift and healthy, robust, consolidated ecosystems. And the second is just how proud I am to join this team. They put a ton of hard work into this project, and they've utilized grant money and their own private funds to build out this project to be a suitable habitat for plants, animals, wildlife, and also maintaining a grazing aspect that is really important to many of NRCS's constituents. So at the end of the day, this is an NRCS program, and we hope that you feel empowered by the solution that we're presenting today. And that really gets to the root of number one on this slide, which is the producer working with NRCS to determine mitigation and how those credits can work with the North Utica Mitigation Bank. So the approach that we're really excited about is NRCS kind of problem solving with producers to gauge their impacts, utilizing these credits going forward, and offsetting their negative impacts by swapping with this bank. I think the one thing there's a few things that the producers stand to benefit on this, and Landrum touched on that before. It really is a one-time purchase for the producer. It can increase crop yields through ag land increase post-fill by filling in those wetlands. And it's just an easier all-around thing than dealing with the liabilities of managing a wetland. Once NRCS goes through and basically says, yeah, we have a compliance issue here, the producer's out of compliance, Wes really takes the reins from there on out. And steps 2 through 4 is really in Westervelt's hands, specifically 2 and 3 is in Westervelt's hands, working with the producer to complete the credit purchase and finalize the sale. And then basically saying to NRCS, this is documented and this swap has actually occurred. So, and then the fourth point being NRCS confirming compliance. So those steps 2 through 4 are actually really quick. Those can happen in about a month, and the producer or farmer can get on with their business and get back to what they want to do. So this is really a great program, and I hope NRCS can realize the benefit of mitigation banking to offset these negative impacts on agricultural lands. And I really hope you guys will work with producers to determine their impacts and see how you can offset those using credits so that this program can be allowed to grow. And with that, I'll just turn it back over to Landrum for any questions that you may have. And I want to thank you again for your time today.
Thank you much, Will. We will now open the floor to questions. We do have a chat box that is available just to help keep things organized. But if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. We can help answer your questions, hopefully, on this presentation. Additionally, if people want to reach out post-presentation, our contact information is below. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to answer your questions.
So I know somebody out there has to be thinking, well, okay, when can I buy a credit? And just to give you an update on where we're at right now, we have signed the mitigation banking instrument, which is sort of the plan, the document that covers what they intend to do and how the coverage area, service area works and all that type of stuff. We are finishing up our endangered species consultation. And there's a couple other nuances here. We got to get the easement document validated or verified through Office of General Counsel. But essentially at that point, when they've reached a couple of those milestones, which frankly should happen within a matter of weeks, or just a few weeks here, then they actually get an advanced credit allotment to sell. And so producers right now who are looking for alternatives could consider this as an option. And then those credits will get incrementally released. For example, to just work in nice round numbers, if there's 40 restored acres here, that'll get incrementally released as they reach additional milestones and as the site gets constructed later on this year after harvest, and also after they've reached certain establishment milestones in the growing seasons thereafter. And that's really how all banks work, so that you're not releasing too many credits before you really know your full success. But there's an advance of credit so that you can start getting an investment on your return. So what other questions? Because I know somebody had that one. So what other questions might be out there?
We do have a question from Michael Perry. Looks like Tyler has just answered that in the comments section of the presentation. Okay. The cost of a credit is determined by the amount of need. Basically, it depends on the situation and exactly what the agricultural producer's need is. If there is no other questions for this time, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our emails are below. We will also be sending the NRCS offices some information about the program and the mitigation bank, which should help with discussing this with potential agricultural producers who may be looking at the bank to offset their mitigation needs.
And Tyler, Landrum, or Tyler, if you want to answer this, sorry. That'll kind of be in the form of, you have some brochures, for example, that kind of explain what's available and who the contacts are, that type of thing.
Correct. Yeah, it's just a quick little, I like to call it a cheat sheet. Just shows you all the information that you need to know on the project. I do not have one in arm's reach, but we will be sending those out to your offices.
Landrum, I'm going to make one more comment that I think is warranted or valid, and it ties back into Michael's question about the cost. And it's really not our business. I mean, it is our business in a roundabout sort of way, but it's a private transaction, no different than if a producer hired a consultant to go develop a mitigation plan for them. One producer might pay somebody $1,000 to go develop a plan, and the next one might pay $4,000, and it may be due to the complexity of the plan or the size of the plan or the type of contractor or consultant they hired. But the comment I'll make about the price of a credit, and even before NRCS had banking credits available, and I sit on the interagency review team for Corps of Engineers banks. Invariably, people are surprised at the cost initially. It's like, wow, it costs X amount per acre. But I think it's important for us who really aren't involved in the cost discussion anyway, but for us to understand, and especially for the landowner to understand all the things that went into developing a bank, whether that be the risk, whether that be the land itself, the big yellow equipment, the permitting, the design, some of those kinds of factors. So I do feel like producers, or in the case of some of the poor banks, a developer thinks to themselves, okay, it's going to cost me 10,000 or 50,000 an acre, whatever it is. And they think, wow, my land's not worth that much. Well, there's a lot more to it than just the land. That's just the start. And then there's the design and the construction and the follow-up maintenance, and then all the paperwork that goes with it. So I just wanted to put that out there because it's a kind of a matter of perspective, and make sure that folks understand everything that goes into it. And oftentimes, I think what we find on individual site by site mitigations, my experience has been, having approved a number of those projects where a producer hires a consultant to go construct their wetland. I'm of the opinion that many landowners are surprised in the end how much that costs. Up front, they are thinking to themselves, there's a little bit of land, I got to pay this consultant. And then there's always something else. There's always some factor related to construction, or a reseeding because of a failure, or a storm event that caused maintenance, those types of things. So with that, I think we'll pause and see if there's any last minute comments or questions.
Hey, Rich, it's Sean. Can I make a quick comment?
Sure, please do. This is, for those of you that don't know, this is Sean Vickers, who used to be the state resource con in Nebraska, who now kind of oversees the wetland mitigation banking program nationwide. So go ahead, Sean.
Well, I just want to mention a couple of things. It's important for the audience to know that Westervelt is one of the most widely known and respected wetland mitigation banking companies that are out there. And they, in fact, helped us put together the first sign up back in 2016. I personally feel bad that it has taken this long to get the project off the ground and going, but those things are kind of beyond our control. But if anyone has any doubts, let me just assure you that Westervelt is widely known in the industry as being one of the best companies out there.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that.
Thank you for that, Sean. If there are no further questions, or at least you don't want to ask it at this time, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. If anyone joined late or was not able to join, we are recording this presentation, so we are able to share it with y'all and anybody else who would like to watch the presentation. But with that, I'd like to thank you for being with us today and learning about the North Utica Agricultural Mitigation Bank. Thank you much, and have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.